Hopefully everybody's staying nice and dry. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So welcome to the joint meeting of the Rules and Open Government Committee and the Committee of the Whole. Tony, can we take roll, please?
Arenas?
Yes, I'm back.
Cohen? Cohen? I'll come back. I see he's unmuted, but I'm not hearing him. Davis? Perales?
Here.
Jones?
Present.
Cohen? I see his, for the record, I see his name there. I see his microphone is unmuted. I'm not seeing a video, but we do have a quorum with the other three.
Great. Thank you, Tony. And I want to welcome the new member of the committee and welcome back an old member of the community, or older, more experienced member of the committee. And I want to say, first of all, Raul, welcome, and glad to hear that you're my vice chair. And I think this is the first time you've been my wingman. I know I've served in as your wingman, so I'm glad to have you here. And just want to tell you that your number one job is to get me back on track when I go off the rails. So I just want to let you know that Sylvia and Deb are very experienced at that, but I just want to know let you know what your number one job is.
Happy, thank you for the welcome, Chevy. Happy to be serving as your wingman here.
I appreciate it. All right, let's get started, and we're gonna first review the agenda for February 2nd. So let's start out. On pages 4 and 5. Six and 7. Eight and 9.
Actually, I had on 2.10, I wanted to see if we could actually move that to, or pull that off of consent, sorry, and have that down in transportation and aviation, and our office has been in communication on this plan, and we know there's a lot of people in the community, and in fact, I believe they enjoy seeing a presentation and having a discussion on that.
Okay, can the maker of the motion incorporate that in the motion, please? All right, pages 9 and 10.
Vice Mayor, I apologize, I didn't raise my hand.
Oh, sorry.
I think we were on page 8, correct?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I wanted to request to have the childcare update at time certain. Maybe not before 5. I know we have a COVID update that day. So whatever is feasible.
Okay. And not before 5. Would you particularly knowing how long our COVID updates go, would your preference be not before 5, not before 6?
I guess maybe not before 6, because that is our evening break, right? Or dinner break.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
Just quickly, for the committee's consideration, our 3.1 presentation is actually going to be a bit shorter and crisper, focused on kind of 2 or really 3 things, and the remainder of the agenda is somewhat light. So just with the exception of if you guys make decisions later on in the Rules Committee, the rest of the agenda is fairly light for other items to blend in. to further in the night.
Okay, so we'll say not before 5, and then
Gotcha. All right.
we'll-
Um,
right.
yeah, and I don't know. It sounds like maybe we 3.1 won't take us up to 5 o'clock. Lee, is that what you're saying?
I would be crossing my fingers and knocking on wood if I said that, but it is our intention to crisp up those presentations and make them a bit more focused.
Uh-huh.
And when we have items like the childcare or anything else where we're asking for council input to agendize those separately, like we have here.
Okay, got it.
You kind of have a feeling, Councilmember Reyes, of a not before 4. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Or
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe not before 4, and that way we can tell folks at the very least 4 o'clock would be a good time for them to call in.
all right, if the maker of the motion can incorporate that, that'd be great.
Thank
All
you.
right, pages 9 and 10, and that's it. And there's an ad sheet as well. So now we'll go to public comments. Blair, go ahead.
Hi, happy new rules in government, rules in open government structuring. There are not too many agenda items for this week, signaling that you will spend a lot of time on COVID-19 issues, I assume. Thank you. I will have to start to apologize regularly for not giving better COVID-19 death statistics this fall. I think they are about double in Santa Clara County in what I reported initially. I can hopefully report during the city manager's report 3-1 next week of what can be more accurate death statistic numbers. Although we may be headed in a good direction, I think we should have waited a week or two longer before declaring an end to the previous lockdown conditions. It would offer the concepts of responsibility and good practices before the understandable needs of economics, and what can turn into only a macho pursuit of liberty and freedom. Item 2.8 to 2.11 are mostly about VTA things. From item 2.8, with the past decade of work towards more open and better accountability, the more recent concepts of equity and imagine and reimagine can actually be some of the better ideals and reasonings of our time. I hope the VTA will establish some sort of advertising ethics review board and public policy process review for any new large advertising in this place in the future of VTA transit hubs. I ask we learn to keep out offensive advertising and advertising that does not work toward the ideas of equity and reimagine. I have a lot of words about AV use. Let me try to finish here. With items 2.10 and 11, I can understand wanting to work on the sometimes thorny issues of automatic vehicles, and very much of a thank you to involve the East Side in this process. However, from all these current new efforts, it may only be small delivery packages that will be the actual function of AVs and working part of our society in 10 years' time. To conclude from this, to ask a simple question to keep in mind, will VTA electric buses and its charging need to take some sort of budget precedence with the VTA in the next several years before
Thank you, sir. So no more public comments, so I'm bringing it back to the committee, if I can.
Motion to approve and pull 2.10 under transportation and aviation services, time certain on 3.3, and include the ad sheet.
Okay. And the time,
Second.
and the time certain for 3.3 was 4
4 p.m. Yes.
Got it.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm seeing Paul Soto with his hand up as well.
Oh, okay.
You can see that on your end.
Hey, Paul, sorry I missed you. Go ahead.
Paul Soto, yeah, right on. Thank you for that. Thank you for catching that. My issue was with regard to Dev Davis's proposal. It just, I'm sorry if this, it just, hearing equity coming from District 6, it just,
Hey, Paul, did we lose you?
I think he's referring to my memo for later in the meeting.
On the table, the redlining policies.
Hey,
I mean,
Paul,
yes.
are you referring to Councilmember Davis's memo from?
Yeah, the memo.
Can you hold off on your comments until we get to that item, and then we'll make sure you're called. Thanks, Paul. All right, we have a motion. Second, Tony.
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Peralez,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Vice Mayor, sorry to interrupt again. I'm getting emails from Martha O'Connell, who's in the public, who's also having issues raising her hand on this item, and she's wishing to speak.
Okay. Let her. Can you?
Yeah, I see her with her hand raised now. She was having issues when the time came.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go ahead and have her speak. Go ahead, Martha.
Okay, thank you, Henry. I wasn't having issues. I had my hand up. The issue was you guys consistently don't see all the hands. Anyway, Martha O'Connell from Golden State Manufactured Homeowners League, representing mobile home park residents. I'd like to thank the administration for the addition of 8X, which is a targeted rent increase freeze for those mobile home residents impacted by COVID. And I want to make 3 important points. Once again, the city cannot prevent mobile home park owners from filing a petition for fair return, which can result in huge rent increases. The city of San Jose cannot prevent mobile home park owners from filing a petition for fair return every single year if they want. The city of San Jose cannot prevent or place a freeze on any raise granted by a hearing officer after a fair return petition. So thank you very much for this targeted rent freeze. It's going to save mobile home park residents a lot of grief and stress. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. All right, does anyone want to change their vote based on additional public comments? If not, moving on to agenda for Tuesday, February 9th. And we are going to start on pages 4 and 5. Six and 7. Eight and 9. 10 and 11. 12. And that's it. There's no ad sheet for this item.
Vice Mayor, 12.4 says recommended deferral per the administration. The agenda will be updated when it's posted, but we're going to be deferring that to February 23rd.
Okay. Should that be incorporated in the motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. If the maker of the motion can incorporate that.
Was that 10.4 you meant?
I'm sorry, 10.4.
No, it's going to be on the 21st.
23rd.
23rd.
Okay. Public comments, Mr. Beekman.
Hi, thank you. For item 4.1, I'm interested how less than lethal use of force issues can work with important new ideas of police peer review. And I think it's item 3.5, with COVID-19 issues, thank you in the work of San Jose being able to help create their own budgets, funding plans to help address rent forgiveness issues for tenants. There are important protests today stating Santa Clara County has the highest rate of evictions in the Bay Area. For as much care as local Santa Clara governments can have, I hope this can be a time to consider what can be that extra step, what can be the next step. I've tried to do my part, and for the past 6 months, I've tried to describe how the entire process can be easier for both tenants and owners alike. And it's just a matter of local government being a good facilitator to good funding programs readily available to all sides at this time. It is all of ourselves trusting each other and trusting these funding programs that can be a simple, friendly way to help all of us in this difficult time. I hope this can be more and more clear to each other in the following months. To speak to Martha O'Connell's ideas she talked about last night and today, is there a way that, she's described the fair return process that could cause trouble in the future. Is there a way Martha could bring together her Mobile Park Coalition, the Golden State Mobile Park Association? Can she bring them together to understand how owners can receive funding help? And they have to learn to practice the idea they don't have to be overcharging at this time. That takes organization and a lot of effort. It cannot be done at this time to help out this situation and look for better answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
I'm a little confused. I don't understand why I was kicked off from the last pitch I had with regard to District 6's memo.
Oh, because we haven't gotten to that item yet.
Okay, I just wasn't
yeah.
told.
So as soon as we get there, we'll.
Okay, got it. I just wasn't made aware of that. Okay, understood. Yeah, I'd just like to piggyback on what Mr. Beekman was talking about with regard to. I mean, the city has a responsibility to protect its citizens. I mean, these are just fundamental 10th grade civics kinds of lessons that we do need to protect them, irregardless of what the state is doing. If the state is failing them, if the federal government is failing us, if the county is failing us, that's fine. That's why we have city council representatives to represent us. We don't live in an actual democracy. That's another thing, is that we live in a representative government. We live in a republic, which means that we have representatives in place that facilitate the democratic process. But one person, one vote, and then we have the power. That's not how it functions. That's not how it works. And so we trust our representatives to exercise that degree of duty, of stewardship, of responsibility, and protection, to see yourselves as protectors, that when the federal government fails us, when the state government fails us, that when the county government fails us, that we have a city government that will protect us. Because after that, after your line of defense that you provide within this democracy, within this representative government, we have no other recourse. We have no protection at all. So I just want to really emphasize in terms of the responsibility and the duty of our representative government. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so can we get a motion from the committee?
I'll move to approve the agenda with item 10.4 deferred to February 23rd.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Tony?
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Peralez,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the public record. Let's see if we have any. Blair. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I was just looking, I don't think there even is a public record this week, is there?
Doesn't look like there are any items on there, Vice Mayor.
All right, so Blair, you'll get another chance to speak, but you won't be able to speak on this item. So on to the consent calendar. And let's see if we have any public comments on consent calendar. I don't see any, so can I
Move
get?
approval.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. And Blair, I see you raised your hand.
Hi, thanks. I thought maybe this could be a time to, just give a voice out, a shout out to the Human Services Commission. This seems like something of their good work that can work on. And yeah, just to mention their work and their efforts, they seem to be in a bit of trouble right now, and how, they might be kind of put on hold for a few months. I hope they can just continue to do their work in the next few months, because I think we just need to hear their voice and their good examples at this time. I mean, we're kind of at a, difficult time, I think, for ourselves, that I think we can, try to say is good, but it's the efforts of people and groups like the Human Services Commission that we can feel that we're doing the best for ourselves and the good thing at this time. And so I really hope you can keep the commission going and active, and just to have their thoughts put out there each month and actively thinking and working. It's really needed, I think, at this time. And for issues like this, for domestic violence issues and women's rights issues. I mean, just many, many issues that are the better parts of ourselves. I hope you can, I hope they can keep going at this time, and a thank you to their work.
Thank you. There's no more public speakers, so I'm gonna bring it back, and we have a motion and a second. So Tony, can we get a?
Yeah, Arenas? Arenas?
Sorry, yes.
Cohen?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Peralez?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, on to G2, which is Urban Greening Implementation Plan. And Councilmember Davis, before we go to public comments, would you like to speak to your memo?
We can do public comments first.
Okay, so first comment is Blair.
Hi, thank you. To quickly clarify, I know that Martha O'Connell does a lot of work, organizing work already, and I don't want to discredit that at all. I hope this is a time she can make the extra efforts and to consider that, how to reorganize ourselves. I hope she can do that. Good luck to her in those efforts and all of our efforts. For this item, the issues of greening things, I really like the interconnectedness of it, with how it can interconnect with many other subjects of our city, and it's defining our future of our city, and I really like that. And these items were at CED during the fall. And just really cool speakers would come and speak about these issues and how they could interconnect with environmental issues, the future of green technology issues. And then that goes into my, open public policy ideas and how that develops better democratic practices. And that's the ideas of Vision Zero and creating better community harmony. And, it just goes on and just does a really good thing. And that's our good stuff. That's our future of our sustainability. And so that's just nothing but positive, nothing but good, and so I wanted to thank yourselves for that work at this time. We were doing this work before COVID-19, and it's really a statement to what is positive and possible and good, and what is our good community efforts, and why we can address the issues that happen at the U.S. Capitol at this time. And so, just really nicely in good terms. So good luck in these efforts, and thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
Yes, when we haven't dealt with and confronted and reckoned ourselves with, coming to terms with what has happened here in San Jose is a process. okay, in the city as a whole, and yet everybody agrees that redlining happened in that district. Okay, redlining has all kinds, it's multifaceted in terms of the way it manifested itself politically, the way it's manifested economically, the way it manifested psychologically, the way it manifested socially, the way it manifested spiritually. We're not at a point where we can have that conversation, but yet we are continually allowing funding to go to beautify that neighborhood. This is obscene. And I'm not the only one that sees this. So to have this kind of, Martin Luther King talked about that, about the lukewarm moderate that will agree with me in principle, but won't agree with me when it comes to their vote. But darn it, man, you're right on the money there, and I agree with you totally. I see it. However, I just I got to go in this other direction. This is the part of the government that is becoming obscene. You know, I mean, District 6 has a lot of nerve talking about equity. I mean, they can't even define what that means to me. They don't even know what that means. I know what that means. You know why? Because I know the reasons why equity is so necessary today. I know the reason why. It's in my blood. It's in my legacy. It's in my heritage. And some of it is buried with my ancestors in Oak Hill Cemetery. Okay, so it's using those terms and the city to that particular area before they've reckoned with the redlining that created that area, I believe is obscene.
Thank you, Paul. Joshua?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Jones. On behalf of Save the Bay, I'd like to start by acknowledging San Jose's leadership to address the climate crisis. The memo being offered today by Councilmember Davis is the next phase in that effort, which is building a more climate resilient community. Since Councilmembers Davis and Perales first offered a memo on this topic in September of 2019, the urgency for climate resilience strategies has only grown, which last year's unhealthy heat and air quality demonstrate. To better protect residents from climate risks and improve the quality of life overall, San Jose must embrace a comprehensive, equity-focused urban greening plan that prioritizes those communities that shoulder the greatest risk, as this memo outlines. Urban greening defends against climate risks, simultaneously supports climate-smart San Jose goals for greenhouse gas reductions, and provides a variety of community benefits like bike and pedestrian safety and water quality improvements. The foundation is already laid for this approach with the city's variety of planning documents, but what San Jose lacks is a coordinated cross-departmental implementation strategy that integrates greening into all aspects of city planning. Doing so will ensure that these projects provide the widest variety of climate and quality of life benefits and the most cost-efficient process. This shouldn't fall on one department, but rather staff capacity to carry out this mandate should be spread across departments and coordinated at the city manager's level to ensure collaboration and prevent bureaucratic obstacles from obstructing this important work. But why now? While the past year has disrupted much, it has not delayed the looming crisis of climate change, and it demonstrated the need for an integrated cross-departmental solutions to community-wide problems. San Jose is continuing to upgrade public infrastructure that provides opportunities for integrating urban greening cost-effectively that we can't afford to miss. And also the Biden administration has a renewed focus on funding for climate adaptation. So now's the time to prioritize local projects so that the city's prepared to compete aggressively for outside funding. I'd like to thank Councilmember Davis for her leadership on this and urge you to support this memo. Thank you.
Thank you. Lena?
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Lena, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority to share our strong support for the comprehensive urban greening strategy and implementation plan. The city of San Jose has demonstrated and continues to demonstrate significant climate leadership through its implementation of Climate Smart San Jose, including the development of a natural and working lands element, which considers the climate adaptation and mitigation benefits of protecting and enhancing green spaces like those in Coyote Valley. The Open Space Authority believes that one of the most effective steps that the city can take to ensure the realization of these bold planning efforts is to create a comprehensive strategy to implement nature-based solutions in urban areas. Nature-based solutions like urban greening offer innumerable benefits, such as helping to manage stormwater, improve water quality and air quality, and alleviate urban heat island effect. Especially during and after a public health crisis like the one we faced, solutions like these are critical for our community's physical and mental health. Therefore, we urge the prioritization of an urban greening strategy and implementation plan in the city's annual priority setting process that would build on the city's record of climate leadership. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Dave? Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I was having a hard time finding the unmute button.
No
Well,
worries.
thank you, Council Member Davis. I'm ready. You hearing me?
Yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
Thank you, Council Member Davis, for putting forth your memo. I urge the committee to move it forward to the full council. When I first wrote out my 2 minutes, I tried to restate all the health and other valuable services that trees and green infrastructure provide, and cite the language in the general plan that already calls for them. But the list is long, so I refer you to our Audubon, Sierra Club, and California Native Plant Society letter. What's missing is the fact that when we see a leaf that's all chewed up and damaged, we need to think, woohoo, right on. Guesses anyone? What the heck am I talking about? It means there's caterpillars feeding on those leaves. So what? Anyone? Okay. Well, if you don't already think caterpillars themselves are cool, keep in mind that songbirds feed their young primarily caterpillars. It means we will have bird songs in the spring, and the caterpillars that survive will become moths or butterflies. The thing is, most caterpillars only have a few host species of plants on which they feed, generally our native plants. So you may want to add an educational component to this initiative. I think providing something like an informational card about the value of native and water-wise plant landscapes with home sales could be very helpful. Perhaps the Valley Water would pay for it. The situation for most insects that pollinate our crops and are so important for our food chain as well as for wildlife is dire. As we've seen with the tragic loss of our magnificent Western monarch migration, who would have thought we could lose the beautiful and once ubiquitous monarch? Please move forward with this greening initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Shani?
Good afternoon, Sarah Jones and committee members. I'm Shani Kleinhaus speaking for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. I support what Dave said. I wanted to say a recent study that encompassed all of Europe, published in December, showed that high biodiversity in people's vicinity is as important to their life satisfaction as their income. This may be surprising, but it was not even limited to high income populace. It was pretty universal. So the study actually showed that individual enjoyment of life correlates with the number of surrounding bird species. We hear this all the time at Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, from San Jose residents and others. And we see that in this time of COVID, people's appreciations of birds and nature increased greatly. So the joy and inspiration that the community derives from seeing and hearing birds is why we've been advocating for rewilding the urban landscape for a long time now. And we worked with the city on different planning efforts to integrate birds and pollinators and biodiversity into the sustainability framework. Vegetation, especially native species, should be prioritized in the urban forest, stormwater treatment, power plant, and even private properties. So we truly appreciate Councilmember Davis's memo. We hope you advance it to put it on the agenda. It is really time to capture the imagination and inspire people with the nature in the city and to use nature's force in cleaning our air, cleaning our water, alleviating the impacts of climate change, including the urban heat island. In time of climate change, loss of biodiversity and uncertain futures, it is more important than ever to protect birds and to integrate locally native trees and shrubs and rewild and green our urban landscape. Thank you.
Thank you. Nikita?
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Nikita Sinha, and I'm the program manager for Walk San Jose with California Walks. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the urban greening implementation plan. I want to express my strong support for this plan and my excitement at seeing the city taking a holistic approach to addressing environmental, health, and safety issues on our streets. A comprehensive urban greening strategy is necessary to meet our environmental, traffic safety, and mode of travel goals set out by Climate Smart San Jose and Vision Zero. Last year, despite lower traffic, the city still had 49 people die on our streets. Cars traveling at higher speed led to an increased likelihood of a crash ending in severe injury or death. This week, with heavy amounts of rain, families are once again preparing for flooding. The proposed urban greening plan meets the urgency of both of these issues through traffic calming and flood management. By linking urban greening with ongoing transportation projects, this plan will help create human-scale streets that address urban heat islands, traffic safety, water quality, and flood management. I'm looking forward to seeing the collaboration across departments and plans for this effort. I urge you to support the recommendations outlined in Councilmember Davis's memo, and thank you again for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Rhonda? Go ahead, Rhonda. Take your.
Sorry, I was on mute.
No worries.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of the committee. My name is Rhonda Berry, President and CEO of Our City Forest, and we enthusiastically support this initiative. I want to thank the Councilmember Davis and also Save the Bay for this really bold initiative and for your leadership on this, something we need so much, and we couldn't be more excited. We would like to ask about putting some teeth into the plan in terms of what is needed to help break down equity barriers. You know, this is work we've actually been doing over the last nearly 3 decades, and support is needed for particular strategies, but for urban forestry, it can be expensive. So most of our funding isn't even used for trees and plants, but for actually working against these equity issues. So we have to cut through cement and auger compacted soil, track down rental property owners to get permission to even plant. And we must find stewards to train and make sure that the trees and shrubs we plant survive. And only then can that vegetation address climate change. So these efforts cost so much more than the trees, yet they're essential to actually growing an urban forest and to making sure that it's a healthy urban forest for all. Planting trees along major thoroughfares is grand and even important in our opinion, but more trees are needed in our underserved neighborhoods. And we feel that that's not just important, but essential, not only for climate change, but for the health of all of our residents. So we thank you for considering this forward-thinking initiative, and we're here, as always, to help you in any way we can, every step of the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda?
Hi, I'm Linda Ruthruff. I'm a volunteer environmental advocate for the California Native Plant Society, Santa Clara Valley chapter. And I'm also a San Jose resident. Vice Mayor Jones, I'm in your district. Our bodies and our minds developed in the context of the natural world. There's a large body of scientific literature that delineates all the many benefits to our health, our minds, and our well-being of spending time in nature. When we take nature breaks, our blood pressure goes down and our immune system improves. We become more creative problem solvers and our memory improves. These are just a few examples of the many benefits of having elements of the natural world around us. Nature should surround us in our daily lives. Planting native plants where people work and play gives the greatest benefits as they provide habitat for birds, butterflies, and other pollinators, rather than the more sterile environment created by non-native plant palettes. We urge you to support Councilmember Davis's memo. Nature should surround us in our everyday lives. It shouldn't be something that we have to get in our car to go visit. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all the public comments. So I'm going to bring it back to the committee and Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. So the timing on this memo turned out to be maybe a little fortuitous. I actually had my staff yesterday was out while we were in council delivering flyers and talking to residents to alert them of a flood warning and inform them of the city's EOC services and response. Of course, we know in the summer what we had with heat waves, record-setting temperatures, as well as dealing with the smoke from the wildfires. Tree canopies mitigate those health risks that are associated with the heat island effect that I know some of our commenters mentioned. And so this is an environmental issue, and it comes at a time when we're actually repaving all of our streets. We're in the middle of a comprehensive repaving program for the entire city. And the idea here is to really integrate implementation of our urban greening, our green stormwater infrastructure plan, as well as all our use of not only our Measure T, but our SB1 funds that we're using to repave. So that was the purpose for putting forward this memo. And in talking to staff, there was some discussion about the fact that they know that they have to work across departments. And one of the issues that arose is that the funding that comes for environmental projects and the funding for street projects generally don't align. And that's one of the barriers to why we haven't done this in the past. And so that's the reason for the recommendations about having staff work together and also to have the intergovernmental relations team work and advocate for more flexibility in funding when we're doing multi-layer projects. So that's the purpose of the memo. I did have a couple of questions for staff based on the early consideration form, and I see that Matt Kano's here. Matt, we have on not next week's, but the following week's agenda for council, we have the master consultant agreement for planning and implementation of the green stormwater infrastructure plan. Yet we got a yellow light saying there was not funding for this. So can you talk a little bit about what those consultants are going to do and how much of this work could be folded into their work?
Sure, thanks for the question. Councilmember Matt Kano, Director of Public Works. So we are recommending 2 master consultant agreements for up to $5 million value each. And these consultant agreements, so since they're master agreements, they don't specifically come with funding attached to them. And when we have funded projects, so back up, there's no project appropriations attached to these $5 million master agreements right now. When we have funded projects, we can tap into these master agreements to utilize the consultant services. As an example, we have Measure T dollars. We allocated about $23 to $25 million of Measure T money for green infrastructure projects. We can use that money to design and implement construction projects. And so we would be tapping into these consultant agreements to do that design work in collaboration with us. That Measure T money cannot be used for citywide studies and initiatives. It needs to be used for specific project implementations. So there's
Just
that's your question.
And if I could just clarify, thank you, Matt. Councilmember Davis, I think, thank you for referencing the early consideration form. One thing that I don't know if we actually put in here in detail, but with recommendations 1 through 3, they really will require obviously some staff capacity, which we need to address as part of the roadmap exercise, but the funding as well. And I do think if we're successful on recommendations 4, 5, and 6, as opposed to waiting to come back in future years, we can go ahead and start some of that work or come back to the council when that funding materializes. I would say the intergovernmental relations team is hopeful. President Biden has talked about a large infrastructure package, has talked about a large policy and package around climate change. So I do think there'll be opportunities for funding. And so we do recommend greenlighting those recommendations. but then circling back with the council in the future on 1 through 3, just to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. And I know I think there was a request for funding of a similar type in the previous budget. Matt, I don't think it was accepted for this most recent 2021 budget. What would it take to do 1 through 3?
We don't have a specific cost estimate, and so we know we have been looking at more funding for green stormwater initiative projects, and we're going to continue to look for more funding in addition to the Measure T funding. I don't have an exact number, but to implement item 1, which is first of all, I want to just say we definitely agree on the value of these projects and this initiative, and so it's just trying to figure out, okay, how and what would it take to get it done. Efforts like this, to me, require 3 things. One is they require the funding for the work to actually do the study, and so typically this would probably be a consultant, although sometimes you can do these studies or these kind of plans in-house. Then a project manager. Obviously, that's not an ongoing project manager, but for the life of the study. But just as important, and something that is often missed, is the management capacity. Something like this, even if it has a full-time project manager and a consultant money to implement the study, an effort like this will definitely acquire bandwidth of management throughout different departments in the city. So that is something that would need to be weighed against the other council priorities. Like I said, it's definitely understand and appreciate and agree with how important this is, but that's just something that we would have to factor in.
Okay, thank you. John, did you want to weigh in? I know this touches DOT too.
Yeah, Councilmember, thanks a lot. John Russo, Director of Transportation. I don't have a whole lot to add from what both Lee and Matt were talking about. I think we're supportive of this. As you know, we have done several green streets projects around the city, not many, but when we have funding, and usually that funding comes from non-transportation resources, it comes from somewhere else. So and then trying to match that up with a pavement project or another street improvement project is a little tougher. So we're going to start looking at that now that we're planning 3 years in advance for pavement projects. And if we would have funding that could add these green infrastructure elements into it, we probably can do it within that 3 year, but trying to do it within a 1 year timeframe of the early next year's paving is going to be tough. But I think we're open to looking at that. Dependent on funding, we can do this. These are not as easy as just trying to get repavement done on a regular schedule, but we have done these in the past and we can continue to do so.
Great, thank you. So Lee, help me out here. Do I need to move items 4 through 6 to go directly to the council? Or does staff not need full council direction for those items since they're on green?
Technically, that is green lit, and it's also part of the existing legislative guiding principles that we've adopted. So we would not, you would not need to move those forward to the council, in my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nora.
That's my understanding of how you handle that lighting.
Okay, thank you. So I can't remember, do we have to have a motion for things to go on to priority setting?
Yes.
Okay. So I see that one of my colleagues has his hand raised, so I won't make the motion until I hear from my colleagues.
All right. Councilmember Cohen?
I'm happy to have you make the motion. I'm in full support of your memo. I wanted to make some comments in support. First, to say thank you for your memo. And of course, when I read your memo, my first reaction was to say I wish I had written it myself. But I do want to say that clearly the things on there are very important for actions that we have to take for mitigating climate change. If everyone hasn't watched the Netflix documentary Kiss the Ground, it's really important to understand how these kinds of actions are going to be necessary. Reclaiming the earth, greening our landscapes, and while most of that has to do with agricultural land, there's a lot of things we can do in our city landscapes to make a big difference. And in fact, it occurs to me, we talk about the cost. We ought to all start thinking about what is the cost if we don't do these things, because there's a large cost to us that we're incurring because of the effects of what's happening around us. And so we ought to be figuring out ways to make these things happen and find sources of funding. And we might be able to find sources of funding through other grants and other ways. But we ought to. I think these are things that ought to be a priority for our city. And I also want to thank the speaker from our city forest. I would be interested in more conversation with that organization about some of the things that she talked about, some of the issues that arise when it comes to finding places for planting those trees. I know that Downtown Rotary, for example, is providing weekly grants to our city forest to try to provide specifically more green space in East San Jose. They're giving grants each week to address those heat islands in East San Jose where there's not enough trees. And so I'd be interested in learning more about how that's going, how that's working, and what the impediments are to making that happen, and how the city can work better with our city forest and with Rotary and other organizations that are interested in speeding up that process of getting more planted and more green tree coverage and other greenery planted around the parts of the city that don't have enough. So those are my comments, and I'm happy to second your motion, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. Well, I will move items 1 through 3 to go to priority setting, with the understanding that items 4 through 6 staff is already taking action on.
Great. So we have a motion and a pre-motion second. So we'll go to Councilmember Arenas.
Thank you. I'm also in support of the urban greening implementation plan, and I want to thank Councilmember Davis for bringing it forward. One of the issues that I know, a portion of the east side that I represent, and I know I've heard Councilmember Carrasco talk about the difference in degrees as you travel through our city, and I know certainly I can appreciate it in some of my parts of my district. And as you extend further to the hillsides, it does start getting a lot cooler, especially when you're walking the streets and that's the mode of transportation that you primarily rely on, right? Either walking or transit. And so I think this is an absolute necessity. I also like how you are focusing on making sure that this is equity based. And one of the concerns that I had was that a lot of our repaving has already happened and I'm going to blame John Risto in the transportation department, because he's doing such a great job. He's covering a lot of our streets, darn it. And, many of our streets that have already been done are some of the streets that needed the most support, right? That just were rated really low. And I'm going to guess that a lot of those streets were in communities that have lower income households, and that for whatever reason, maybe tract housing or just they have an absence of a lot of this green urban tree canopy, right? So I hope that what we can do is make sure that there's some cross-reference between what's already been done in terms of repaving and resurfacing, and also, those streets that have already been completed and will be left out in some ways because that effort has already been done. And if we could take a look at, if it's not through repaving or resurfacing, that, I'm thinking about my own, of course, my own district, and I'm thinking about, we could line it up with combating some of the air issues around Reed Hillview, the water issues around Lake Cunningham, because these are some of the areas that have already been targeted, will probably get done by the time that this is ready to go, or there's funding lined up for this to be in conjunction with our own existing priorities and efforts. And so I'm wondering if we could line it up, and I think you left it very flexible, Councilmember Davis, so that we could line it up. It doesn't have to be with resurfacing and repavement. It could be with any other projects. And I think you mentioned, the Better Bike Plan, Vision Zero, Urban Village plans. I just wonder if we can expand a little bit more to maybe transportation infrastructure rebuilding of, or because I'm thinking about my light rail extension to Eastridge, and there's an opportunity there as well to coincide with some funding that's already secured. And then I'm also thinking about some of the neighborhoods in my district that have already been repaved or resurfaced that will miss out, and what will we do for those folks? And so I wonder, Councilmember Davis, if you would be willing under I think 4 through 6, you said are already existing and will already be approved. So they're not part of the motion, but I wonder if you would add some additional direction in this so that the coordinated approach is not, I love all the teams that you've expressed there, but maybe the race and equity department so that they could represent some of those neighborhoods. I don't know how else to incorporate some of those existing or future some of the neighborhoods that have been missed, that will be missed because of repavement and resurfacing. So however we want to do that, or if maybe John wants to just make a mental note, or however you want to integrate this, but just so that it is noted, because this is, citywide efforts that are taking place currently, and we have a very aggressive schedule for this year, for the next 2 years. So and I don't want to delay them in any way, but I just wonder if we could better coordinate with that.
Thanks, Councilmember Arenas. And I want to be clear, it's not only about repaving. That was just the largest.
Right.
Segment, but your transit extension, I didn't even think of that. So that's a great incorporation. But item number 1 doesn't actually talk about only having urban greening projects with repaving. It's just talking about building on green stormwater infrastructure and identifying urban greening projects and making that equity focus. So it should be the equity lens should be irrespective of whether or not there's been repaving there. That's my intent.
Well, if you want to leverage resources, and some of the resources that are going into that neighborhood are only under repaving, there's no other plans to invest in that neighborhood for to expand an urban tree canopy or for whatever else. How would we address that then?
Councilmember Davis, maybe I could jump in and help a little bit. John Risto, Director of Transportation again. While the green infrastructure, stormwater work and ideas that are being talked about here are important, we're also working on a complementary plan right now within DOT. That's the Urban Forestry Management Plan, which is really going to look at the street tree canopy within the city. That's targeted to come to council at the end of April. So I think some of what we will be proposing to do within that urban forestry management plan will cover some of the questions and concerns and other issues that are brought today about street tree canopies. So happy to bring that forward as well. It is only complementary to this large effort, but an important one as well. Thought I'd add that.
Thank you. I get that it's not only just resurfacing and repaving effort. That's not the main effort, but I just wanted to point out that we would be missing some of these neighborhoods that have already been done. And so just to balance out that missed opportunity that we think more strategically about how to bring something else into the picture. but love the idea. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to make sure that we maximize our resources, and I, of course, I support all of the existing priorities that we already have, and that this will just be complementary. And I hope to hear some of those songbirds that the caterpillars will bring soon enough. So I was really delighted to hear how everything is tied together, and just that reminder of nature that just surrounds us. And so thank you, Councilmember Davis, for bringing this forward.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion that's been seconded. Tony?
Arenas?
Yes.
Cohen?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Peralez?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is G3, hazard pay for retail food workers. Councilmember Jimenez, do you want to speak to this first, or public comments?
Yeah, go ahead and go to public comment first, Chair.
Okay. So first speaker is Paul.
This is what good, comprehensive, sensitive government looks like. I mean, Jimenez, thank you for putting this on the table, man, because I read your memo and you hit every single point. You can't articulate each one of those pieces and each one of these efforts that you're making within the memo without really having a very sensitive understanding of the challenges that people are faced with right now. I mean, it's really hard to listen to these conversations around trees and canopies, and when people are literally dying, man, people are suffering. There's kids right now in their houses scared to death because they're looking at the fear in their parents' eyes with regard to, mommy, what's the matter? Daddy, what's wrong? Or how come they're not home yet? Well, they're too busy working, mija. They can't be home with you, and suffering on these levels. And we're talking about canopies, and we're talking about trees, and it's offensive. So when I read your memo and I saw how clearly you understand what's happening on the street level, which is where I live, and what is actually happening in our communities, and what you can do as a representative of not only your district, but of Sanjo as a whole, of what you can do within your position of power. You are exercising that. And I can't thank you enough and appreciate that. And that's what allows me to continue to come to these meetings and to advocate, because I see what men like you are doing in the community, and I support that 100%. So thank you for being sensitive and understanding and using your position of leadership and your position of power to institute these types of policies in the hopes of at least sensitizing people to the suffering that's happening on our streets.
Thank you, Paul. Blair?
Hi, thank you for the words of Paul Soto for this item. Yeah, I mean, this is a really good example of good human rights and workers' rights that is possible. And so thank you for these efforts. I know the city of Berkeley, they passed similar legislation a week or two ago. And yeah, it's just our better selves, our better persons. Thank you. I compliment the work of Berkeley a lot. I try to mention their more positive work, but they lack sometimes, occasionally, and it's important to bring that out. And I think the words of Paul Soto for the last item to talk about the ideas of equity at this time, it's really important. And I have offered my own words about the ideas of open public policy that are needed. Both of those ideas can kind of get thrown under the bus, basically, and they're kind of left behind sometimes. So good luck in how to address all parts of the community when they have concerns, and how those concerns can be melded into a community whole. And good luck in all of our efforts. That is our community, and those are our good practices. Thanks.
Thank you. Eric?
Hi, my name is Eric Larson. I'm a grocery worker at Lucky's. Wearing a mask all day long is something I've gotten used to. Many customers have bitterly complained about it, though. Some have shouted at me and coworkers and refused to comply with county restrictions. I just shrug it off and do my work. COVID, it became a very real thing in my life after Christmas holidays, when an extremely busy time in the store, when I started seeing coworkers disappear. Where did Molly go? What happened to Dan? Did Carl get sick? No one was saying anything. Management was silent. Last week, Anne came to work finally. She told me she had COVID. She had it bad. Headaches, severe fever, loss of smell, taste, body aches, and more. I realized this is no joke. COVID was in my workplace. My coworkers got it and were quarantined. I don't take for granted the daily health check anymore, and all the precautions we take to distance, wash our hands, wear gloves, sanitize shopping carts, wipe down surfaces are all very important to protect my health, the health of my coworkers, and to protect the public. So my question to you, City Council members, is this: what is my labor worth? I put myself in harm's way. I'm asked to mask up and be in an environment where exposure is a possibility. In fact, it's really only a matter of time before I'm exposed to COVID. I work in an environment that is closed in. I take pride in the fact that I'm an essential worker. I feed families. Do I deserve more than big corporations who are making hand over fist on my labor? Yes, I do. I urge you to support the City Council's ordinance to increase the pay of essential workers, an extra $5 of hazard pay for our labor, for my labor.
Thank you. Cody?
Vice Mayor, it appears that this person has an out-of-date version of Zoom, so I'm not allowed to, or I'm not able to allow them to speak.
Okay. We'll go to the next speaker, John.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to speak. My name is John Gomez. I'm a member of UFCW Local 5. I'm also a 13-year grocery worker for Safeway. Now, since the beginning of the pandemic, grocery workers have not had the option to work from home. We continue to go to work every day despite the risks to our health. According to a recent study, grocery workers have a 1 in 5 chance of contracting COVID-19 at the workplace, compared to an average citizen who has a 1 in 100 chance. Now, it's been 150 days since most essential workers received any compensation for working during the pandemic. At the same time, with stay-at-home orders and other restrictions limiting competition for food consumption, grocery workers are racking in record profits. Instead of investing some of these profits back into the workforce, they have either increased compensation for their executives or used it to buy back shares to increase stock prices. One example is Albertson Safeway spending $1.6 billion in buybacks. Jeff Bezos, who owns Whole Foods, has seen his wealth grow by $50 billion during the pandemic. There are plenty of profits to compensate grocery workers as they continue to risk their lives and those of their families to ensure we all have food and all essential items for daily life. Therefore, on behalf of all grocery workers, I ask the city not only pass the hazard pay for grocery workers ordinance, but that it does so in a way that ensures these businesses can't pass the cost down to its employees by cutting hours or the consumers by raising prices. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, John. That's it for public comments. So we'll go to my colleague, Councilmember Jimenez.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the public that showed up. You know, as I'm hearing some of the comments and having some close family friends and some family members work in the grocery industry, I'm a little embarrassed that it's taken this long to bring this forward. Wish I would have submitted this months ago, to be honest with you. So I'm going to give you a few comments, but let me just first say that I think some folks have reached out to me and we're still in the process of having discussions with some of the Grocers Association and things of that nature. So I expect some of those conversations are going to shake out and happen before this comes to the full council, assuming you all send it forward. But I wanted to just be very explicit about what the intention is here. It really is a narrow ordinance directed at big box grocery stores, right? This isn't intended to impact the 7-Elevens and as an example, in my district, there's a small supermarket called Mercado California that has maybe like 15 employees, barely making it, and so that's what I wanted to express at the outset. I'm not going to go ahead and read the recommendations, but I just want to touch on a few things that I think are important to know as you decide how you're going to vote on this. And one is, what are other cities doing, right? I think that's a common thing that we, as the city of San Jose, look at when we're moving forward in a new space. And so I want to list off a few things. So Long Beach, for example, they've already approved theirs. It's a $4 an hour, applies to companies with 300 employees or more nationwide and more than 15 employees per store in Long Beach. That was unanimously approved January 26th. Berkeley, as it was mentioned, is in progress. That's $5 an hour. City of Los Angeles, in progress, $5 an hour. And I'm not going to go in the detail of all their proposal. Los Angeles County, $5 per hour, in progress. And the city of Seattle has adopted a $4 per hour increase, applies to grocery companies with more than 500 employees worldwide and stores larger than 10,000 square feet. Doesn't apply to convenience stores or farmers markets. The ordinance was adopted on January 25th. Now, why is this necessary is one thing that you may be asking yourself, right? We know that a prominent example that we've continued to lift up, and rightfully so, of folks that are doing the great work during this pandemic, doctors and nurses. They're quite literally, and my wife works at a hospital, but quite literally in the front lines of the battle against this virus. But we also know that retail food workers have served the residents of San Jose just as well by being on the front lines as it relates to some of the places that have remained open. And in fact, a recent study, and some of this was touched on from Harvard, stated that grocery workers who interact with customers may be 5 times more likely to contract COVID-19 than their colleagues who don't have direct contact with customers. The other thing that they found is that 3 out of 4 grocery workers who tested positive were asymptomatic, demonstrating that workers may become a significant transmission source if they continue to work while infected. The other thing I think is important to note is that why big box stores, right? Some of the callers touched on some of the profits, and as our local businesses and most notably restaurants were forced to shut down, supermarkets and other retailers that sell food were allowed to remain open, as we all know, resulting in significant increases in profits. The Brookings Institute did a study and it showed that grocery stores are reaping record profits, increasing rate from ranges 25% to over 150%. And some of the grocers have been doing right by their employees, but it stopped some time back. And that's why, if you look at the recommendation, we did insert some language in there to give credit to folks that are already doing this, that are already doing right by their employees. Now, the other thing I think is worth noting is why did we make sure that this was a big box type of tailored approach? Is that given that the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on small and local businesses, just want to be very clear that we're not seeking to apply this ordinance to small neighborhood grocers or small ethnic grocers with less than 300 employees nationwide. I mentioned the example with Mercado California. And so that I just wanted to point that out because I think that's very, very important. The other thing that we considered when we drafted this, and I say we, meaning my office and I, was really when should this sunset? When should it end, right? Because obviously my hope is the hope of many of you, I'm sure, is that this virus, this pandemic ends sooner rather than later. And so I believe this ordinance should be tied to the county-wide mandates and directives that enforce the shelter-in-place order. As we know that the county office is requiring residents to shelter in place and mandating telework, while grocery workers should be adequately compensated for hazard pay, given that they're going in. And more to the point, if the hazard of becoming infected with COVID-19 persists, my view is that so should the pay. And so that's why we thought that it should be tied to the county order. Now, some questions may arise that, well, what is the opinion of the city attorney? And I'm sure she can certainly chime in, but we did reach out to the city attorney's office. And so assuming this moves forward, it's my understanding that they will draft recommendations for the council to consider that's going to focus on the clarity of some of the terms as it relates to who's impacted and the store type and when the ordinance ends and things of that nature. Additionally, in conversations with the city attorney's office, we included the right of private action, which mirrors the paid sick leave ordinance. And I think that alleviates some of the concern as it relates to enforcement by some of our own departments that I know are stretched thin these days. And in closing, let me just say that let's remember that those workers who put their lives on the line to provide us with food and services do so out of a need to care for themselves and their families. And they unfortunately don't have the luxury to stay home. And also it's important to mention, and I think this is a very key point, is that some of the workers that are going to benefit from this, quite frankly, are some of the workers that live in some of those most impacted zip codes that we often talk about during the course of our council meetings. And so I think this is an opportunity to demonstrate to them that we acknowledge their contributions, respect and appreciate their courage, and more importantly, value their worth. And so thank you for the consideration. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Jimenez. I have a couple of questions. You actually, good anticipation. You anticipate a lot of questions that were going to be coming, so you covered them. So good job on that. I just want some clarity in terms of what we're actually being requested to do. Is it to have the city attorney or this, to come back with a completed ordinance, urgency ordinance that we will vote on, yes or no, on the 2nd? Or is the direction to make that decision to direct the city attorney to come back with an ordinance and have that discussion and debate on the 2nd? So I hope I'm clear on the nuance of what I'm asking.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would say that I would prefer, and I suspect some on the council would prefer to have this move forward sooner rather than later. And so if it is at all possible, and the city attorney can certainly chime in, to bring forward the emergency ordinance on the 2nd, so we can debate it and adjust or whatever it may be as it relates to some of the language and move forward then, that would be the most appealing thing for me. And I think the most expeditious thing to do. But I also understand that there's process. So I defer to the city attorney as to how we can bring this forward as soon as possible.
Okay, so I'm gonna actually defer to the city attorney too, in terms of what are our options and what is your capacity to accomplish that objective?
Thank you both. We have been looking at these issues. It is correct that Long Beach apparently passed an ordinance. They've been sued, apparently. We've got a copy of the lawsuit, and so we're looking at that and trying to analyze those issues. I've also reached out to the county, to James Williams County Council, because they're apparently considering something also, and we'd like to coordinate with them if council decides they want to go forward on this or just want to defer to the county. It is correct also, we've been checking LA County, LA City, and some other places to see what their ordinance is looking like. If they bring something forward, and that hasn't occurred yet. So I don't know that we could have a fully formed ordinance and legal opinion by next Tuesday. We can certainly identify a number of the issues and try to deal with maybe some of the council concerns. Compliance is another question, and council member, I appreciate the fact that you're considered staff feeling really stretched. And we have to think through a little bit of private enforcement if people aren't having to produce documents to the city and sort out, have some way of determining whether or not people are in compliance. That may or may not be an issue. We just don't know yet. We haven't had a chance to really look at that. So there are just a number of issues. So we are working on it, have been working on it, and we can certainly vet some of that with the council. I don't know that we can have a fully formed urgency ordinance by next week is the only concern that I would have, and coordinate internally with staff.
Vice Mayor, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just for clarity. Nora, I guess what I'm wondering, what if we just bring this topic back? Essentially, the memorandum is written to the council next week, or as soon as possible, have that discussion and maybe give a little further direction to you all, so that way you can have a more narrowed sort of path forward. Is that appropriate?
That would certainly help our office and also allow some more time to see what others are doing, find out whether or not there's any kind of an injunction or what happens with Long Beach, because that will help identify legal issues that we would need to perhaps draft around, and some of those kinds of things.
So I guess, Vice Mayor, the interest then would be to agendize it for the next meeting, and if at all possible, and then have that discussion there and give further direction or more narrow direction, and hopefully the city attorney's office would have a little bit more info as it relates to what's going on in some of these other cities.
Actually, Councilman Menace, that's exactly where I was going with this. I shouldn't have allowed you to jump in because that's where I was taking it. So yes, I'm in complete agreement with that strategy. Want to hear from the Vice Chair Perales?
Yeah, thank you. And appreciate Councilmember Jimenez, and I think I agree with you. This is something that would have loved to have considered sooner. I don't think there's any pointing the finger at yourself. I really think all of us had an opportunity, but at this point, let's look forward, right, and let's move this forward. And I think we can have the discussion at the council. I too have some questions. I think that I'll just kind of teed up for staff or for our city attorney's office in regards to when we come back. Councilmember Jimenez was talking about a focus on the big box. I think that's a good focus. Some, I think, nuanced challenges maybe, for instance, I think Councilmember Jimenez, you mentioned 7-Eleven as not necessarily something, right, to include as small neighborhood grocers. There are a number of 7-Elevens that are franchise owned, but I think there are also several that are corporate owned, right? And you look at the corporate owned ones, and maybe you meet threshold, I think clearly, right, of over 300 employees or something like that. So I don't know how that might pan out, right, when you talk about some franchisees and stuff like that. But that would be one of the areas that I'd be interested in just kind of seeing how do we keep that focus, and where we are trying to avoid impacting the true small local business owner, and focus on the big box operators. And happy to hear your thoughts on that, Councilor.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, I think so. I agree, and that's why it was important for me to say it right at the outset of the comments that this is tailored and narrowly tailored to focus on the Costco's of the world, right? The Walmarts, whatever it may be. And so, and I personally see 7-Elevens uniquely different, right? I mean, I don't even know if they may offer some frozen pizza that they warm up, or maybe they have 2 bananas floating around. That is not, that in my mind, that's uniquely different than having a true grocer space within stores like the Targets do and such. And so I think there can be some language that can help sort of carve them out, because I don't want them impacted either.
Great. Thank you. That was it. Appreciate you bringing it forward, and I'll make the motion to approve Councilmember Jimenez's memo, bringing this to the council on, I believe it's the second.
It's been a motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. All right, thank you. So Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. Councilmember Jimenez, I appreciate where your heart is on this issue. And I think, we all are very grateful to our essential workers, including our grocery store workers during this time. My concern is what happens down the line. So if wages get raised to this extent, and that's, I believe it's a 30% increase in people's wages. We already have, I have a Mercury News article here from January 13th. COVID economy, meat, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy prices skyrocket. And that's without this enhancement that you're talking about, this hazard pay that you're talking about. I'm concerned what happens to everyone's grocery prices, and knowing how many, we talk about it every time we get a COVID update, how many people can't afford food already in our city. And so I'm just really concerned about what happens to our food prices in our city and the creation, the potential creation of even more food deserts than we already have. And we know that's an issue in some parts of our city. So I'm really very concerned about what happens, not just with our food retail workers, but what happens with all of the people who need food in this city, who already are having a hard time making ends meet and affording it. And knowing that, you know, SNAP benefits and other CalFresh benefits are not going to increase commensurate with this, and that prices have already increased before this. I'm sorry, but I can't support this for that reason. I'm just really concerned about what happens to all the families trying to afford food.
No, I appreciate those comments, Councilmember Davis. Obviously, at least my intent was to support moving this forward and give everybody an opportunity to at least have a clear understanding of the unintended consequences. There's going to be issues about, you know, price increases for food, which are going to severely impact low-income folks. There's issues about, you know, whether some of these businesses will reduce hours or take other measures to offset those costs. You have issues around if someone gets a vaccination, do they lose that pay because the risk has been diminished? I mean, there's a lot of issues that I think should be discussed and clarified and addressed. So I think that you bring up some valid points. Councilmember Arenas.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted also to just thank Councilmember Jimenez for bringing this forward. I think Councilmember Perales expressed some of my concerns already. One of them is that how to distinguish between some of those folks who own franchises but are not exactly, you know, these huge corporations owning multiple franchises, and how do we distinguish between some small ethnically owned franchises. And so I'm glad we're going to delve into that a little bit more. I do think that we need to make sure that we support our grocery workers with an unintended consequence of exposure to COVID. More than anything, I have not really used delivery service because I think that if I want something from a restaurant, I will go get it. If I need something from a store, I will go get it because it's a need for me, and I don't want to expose additional people down the line of service delivery. But it's my choice to do something like that. We don't really have a choice in terms of employment for a lot of these folks. They can't fall back to something else because, as we all know, everybody's looking for a job. And so I think that when we say, you know, thank you for being out there, thank you for keeping me fed, thank you for incurring that risk, that, you know, that is sometimes not enough, and certainly doesn't cover your expenses when you have contracted COVID, and there's some unintended consequences as well with your own family and people that you interact with, that you might get sick, and then their loss of work and their loss of well-being and even their loss of life. And so I think this is a very moderate approach, and I think rather conservative. And we're doing this 10 months after, when there is a strain that is a little more contractable than the original strain of COVID-19. And so I think it is due time for our grocery workers to be compensated for this. So I'll be supporting the motion on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reyes. I actually have just a couple other just quick questions. And I don't know if Eric Larson or John Gomez, if either one of you are available. John, I see you raised your hand first, so thank you for, first of all, responding. I have just a quick question. Obviously, I think all of us can agree that we want the frontline workers who are making sure that we're fed and have all our essential necessities. I think we all support that conceptually. But if you were looking at a trade-off, and what I mean by that is if your employer was looking at paying a higher hourly wage for hazard pay versus investing money in keeping you safer, how would you evaluate that trade-off? And I'm not asking you to speak for all the employees, but just from your perspective, what are your thoughts about that type of trade-off? And I can give you some specific examples. So there are masks out there that are comfortable, they're N99 rated, and you could survive a chemical or biological attack with these masks, and they run about $35 each. So I'm just using that as one example of what types of investments would you like to see your employers make, and would you be willing to make those kind of trade-offs in terms of an hourly paid wage increase?
Sure. Thank you, Vice Mayor. So to speak on that, my personal opinion, a lot of these, and mind you, I work for Safeway, and I've visited many of other stores during this pandemic. I mean, in my personal opinion, as far as what's provided to the workers from the company for safety precautions, PPE, so on and so forth, it's been very minimal. Many of these grocery stores aren't even limiting the amount of people inside the store, very minimal sanitizing of the carts. I went into a Target the other day, and I was told by the person out front that I had to sanitize my own cart. I had to grab and sanitize my own cart. So, it's hard to, it's really hard to say. Hazard pay, considering the risks that we've had to go through, since this started, we're worse off now than we were when the original stay-at-home order was put in place. Numbers keep skyrocketing. Eric spoke on this when he made his comment. It's only a matter of time before we become exposed. I mean, that's the rate it is. There's outbreaks in all kinds of grocery stores. I think the hazard pay in itself is not only going to incentivize the workers to continue to go into work, but it gives them peace of mind. Sick pay is really minimal. If you contract this COVID-19 and you have to quarantine, sick pay only goes so much. The amount of pay that these workers, have without hazard pay, it is barely getting by. Can you imagine living in California and trying to survive and pay your rent on $15 an hour? It's just not going to happen. So these are reasons why, we're really pushing for the hazard pay, not only because of the profits that the company is making. These companies are not putting it into the workforce. They're not putting it into the PPE or the safety precautions for the workers. They're putting it into themselves, and their own business, rather than passing it down to the workforce. And, we're not asking for all of it, but we believe that, you know, the risks we take, we deserve to be compensated, you know, from those profits.
Right.
I don't know if I'm hoping I answered your question there.
No, you did. I just wanted to get a clear understanding in terms of risk reduction versus increased wages. And every individual has their own, what I call risk tolerance. And I was just trying to get a feel for yours and maybe a representation of some of your coworkers. So yes, you did answer my question.
And if I could just add, you know, as far as the risk level, you know, the risk level being lower, you know, even if the company were to provide, you know, better safety precautions and implement better safety precautions, what it comes down to is the consumer as well. You know, I'm not pointing fingers, but as Eric mentioned in his comment, we do deal with customers who just don't care. They'll walk in the store without a mask, you know, and it's so in that sense, you know, the safety precautions that the company could, you know, the trade-off, you know, it can only go so far because we can't force the workers, the consumers not to do the things that they're doing, you know, coming into the store without a mask, not keeping social distance, you know. Yeah, so I just wanted to add that. And then, you know, I don't know if you wanted to hear from anyone else. I'm sure Eric is still on and he'd be more than willing to chime in there.
Yeah, he has his hand raised. Eric, hopefully you heard the question. Eric?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, thank you very much for calling on me. You know, it's been, you know, 9 months, you know, just of evolving precautions. You know, back in March, you know, I think folks were feeling that, oh, is this really real? And, you know, the summer came along and then kind of the Christmas holidays and Thanksgiving holidays were approaching. And, you know, folks like Dr. Fauci were predicting, you know, a huge surge. And as you can see, you know, we're close to 500,000 people having died in our country now. And I mean, the amount of folks that are being exposed to COVID has just increased. So, you know, I think at my store, you know, the precaution level and anxiety level has gone up. And I'm thankful for my own store managers for, you know, being very diligent about daily checks. You know, we all have to check in at the beginning of our shift. And, you know, we all wear the sticker that we've answered the questions. No, we haven't been exposed. No, yes, we're feeling fine and we're not sick and we can work today. So I'm starting to wear double masks. You know, Dr. Fauci has said, wear 2 cloth masks. That will increase your ability to protect yourself. So, you know, I think it's a matter of respect. You know, that's what it comes down to. My income, you know, has been cut in half since COVID. I wasn't a grocery worker before March. And many of my coworkers, their spouses and partners who worked in the restaurant industry, they've lost their jobs. And so, you know, I'm thankful that my wife's a teacher. She has a good income. My income is like not even anywhere near what I was making before.
Yeah, and Eric, I totally.
I just want to finish on this, is that grocery work is tough work. You know, there's not a day that goes by where I don't come home aching and my muscles aren't tired. You know, try lugging together 6 shopping carts and wheeling them around for 8 hours straight, or picking up milk carton crates. Or another part of my job is washing down the bloody mess in the butcher shop. You know, there's a 1 in 5 chance of me getting COVID. by working in a grocery store. And I'm thankful I have a job. I'm a good worker. I'm a hard worker. I'm glad I'm getting paid. But I've put myself at risk in being in a hazardous environment. And there are a lot of customers. You know, you look back at November, right up to the election, with all the Trump stuff going on. We had so many MAGA people coming into the stores, not wearing masks and just flaunting their First Amendment rights and thinking that this is all a hoax, and that continues. And I can't confront these customers and tell them to leave.
No, Eric, I don't want to cut you off, but I get it. I understand the issues and the hazards that you're facing. So I can't speak for everyone, but I think for most people, there's a recognition of, one, the hard work that you do, the ability or desire to be able to, provide for your family. So that's not in dispute. The purpose of my questions were just to get an understanding of, is it the hazard that's the primary issue that's driving this initiative, or the compensation? And because there are ways to reduce the hazard or mitigate the hazard. And I'm just trying to get a better understanding from you, as well as my colleagues, Councilmember Ramirez, in terms of what's the primary driver behind this initiative. So, but I appreciate your feedback and comments. Councilmember Arenas, I see you have your hand up. Is that a new hand or from before?
No, that was from before, Vice Mayor.
All right, so there's been a motion and a second. If we can have a vote, please.
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Nay.
Morales,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye. Okay, on to G4, which is the GIS analysis for emergency housing on Caltrans land, and that's the mayor and Councilmember Mahan. Councilmember, would you like to speak to this first or go to public comments?
We can go to public comment first. Thanks, Vice Mayor.
All right. Blair.
Hi, thank you. That was a lot for that last item. Thank you for everyone's work. For this item, I wanted to mention that I heard here through city council meetings, Catherine Hedges, I think she spoke at a council meeting a few weeks ago, that homeless people, they aren't being able to get hotel vouchers as easy as they used to. They have to go through a much more rigorous process. She was saying it shouldn't have to be that rigorous. And I hope, I just wanted to, reiterate her words here now. Hopefully they can help your housing department in what should be. Thank you for the words that we are still dealing with a more deadly form of COVID at this time, and that we are not out of the woods, by any means with it. And so I hope, thank you for the words here today. I don't know if this is quite the right time or the right place, but I hope it can be with my minute remaining, that just a reminder with all the eviction moratorium issues and how we have to finesse that at this time. I just wanted to remind that, the whole COVID episode that we're involved in is not the fault of everyday people. And I hope that can be a really guiding force how we create policy, and that we don't have to be fearful of the subsidy process. And that's the major issue for people. And people end up getting really hurt by that. And it's a lot to ask people to want to use the subsidy process, and what it can just make a lot simpler and safer for everyone. I hope we can learn to trust the subsidy process more, and good luck in those efforts how we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Mahan, for your memo on this. I think that these are long overdue in terms of getting creative in how we establish emergency housing, and just that fact is what creates a problem. Emergency. You know, that we're doing this under a lot of different faceted conditions that I can't articulate within 2 minutes. If I had 10, I'd be able to work wonders with 10 minutes. I can only have 2. And so I just want to applaud you for at least making an attempt to address this issue. But if you have any questions about the urgency of the moment in terms of emergency and some of the bureaucracy that doesn't allow that to establish itself, make it concrete in the community, just walk outside. Right now, just walk outside with no jacket on and just walk. And then just imagine that condition over weeks. And then you'll get like a sense, you'll maybe sensitize yourself to the urgency of the moment and what we are morally challenged to do. I don't think that the application of government is absent of our moral and ethical authority or mandate. We are mandated to legislate. We use the law to legislate morals and ethics. The law is simply just a tool. It's not the overall and be all. All the law really is actually designed to do is to facilitate the moral and ethical standards of the society in which the laws exist, which is why I appreciate what Councilman Jimenez was doing. He was using the law to legislate the moral and ethical values of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Bring it back to Councilmember Mann.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. And I just wanted to check, did Councilmember Jimenez have a comment that he wants to make on this item?
I do. I just wasn't sure if I was going to be treated like as
treated like a Go ahead.
Is it okay if I say something now? Just before, I mean, I read the memo, but it didn't come on my radar till a little late. I just want to say I appreciate the efforts. I think what you're going to hear, Councilmember Mahan, from folks maybe here at the full council when this goes forward, is just simply that there's a view that I think is broadly held, and it's held by me, that not every district has stepped up to do its part. In fact, your predecessor, I've never said this publicly, but I had a sense of what was happening is there was a site that was going to be considered for bridge housing in District 10 on the corner of, I think, Coleman and Almaden Expressway. Your predecessor actually came out very openly, and it got that redesignated as parkland. I believe just so simply some of these spaces wouldn't be considered for such things. And so I really appreciate you putting this out and hope that it's really indicative of things to come in which folks from other districts, including District 10, quite frankly, is going to step up and really, I think, participate in moving this issue forward. So I thank you so much for the memo. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Councilmember. Appreciate
Now,
it.
now I'll bring it back to you. Go
What's
ahead.
that? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Councilmember Jimenez. And I certainly, while it's not specifically under the purview of this memo, I'll just say for the record, I think it's important that every district shares in the burden, if you want to call it that, of caring for those who need shelter and services, and that should not just be on a couple of districts. So I share that sentiment. In terms of this memo, it's a pretty narrowly defined ask, and you'll all, I just want to make sure everyone's aware that in addition to the memo that you've hopefully seen, there's a early consideration response form for prioritization, and staff gave us a green light on this. So I want to thank Matt Cano in Public Works and his colleagues in Housing who came together and reviewed this request and felt that this could be greenlit as something that it fits, that is small, aligned, and fits within the existing work plan. So my intention is not necessarily for this to need to go to council at this time, but just for staff to carry out the work as per the early consideration response form. So I really appreciate staff's input and support on this idea. And just to summarize quickly what the idea is, and then curious if folks have questions that I can help clarify. I think what we're going for here is to encourage the city in an efficient and focused way to be proactive about analyzing vacant land. And in this case, we're just focused on Caltrans land that is vacant and at least 1 acre in size. So we're putting a floor on it. We think it would not be a good use of staff time to look at smaller sites. And where staff thinks there is even potential for emergency housing. Now, this actually has already been somewhat in motion from the state. So just over a year ago, the governor issued an executive order that actually required the State Department of General Services to identify excess state lands. And we did receive a list of 5 sites. The problem, and the reason that I feel this, and I think the mayor and I both feel that this memo is necessary, is that we only got 5 sites. And they were not even necessarily, they were not, to the comment that Councilmember Jimenez made, they were not, obviously not across all 10 districts. They were only in a few. And it was not comprehensive. And we've already moved forward with other sites that were not on the list, thus indicating that we didn't necessarily get the best sites. And that makes sense. There's no reason the state up in Sacramento would know which sites are most appropriate, or maybe potentially currently impacted by encampments and have good ingress egress and may be particularly suitable for transforming an unmanaged encampment into emergency housing that could provide more safe and stable shelter with some basic support. So, but just to be clear, this is very, very narrowly focused on doing the GIS analysis, identifying all properties over 1 acre where short-term emergency housing may be feasible, and then it would require further action to do anything with that list. So this is very much an incremental first step, and I'll leave it there because I'm sure there'll be follow-up questions, but that's the intention.
All right, thank you, council member. So I'm going to go to a council member who's done more than his fair share, taking on some of the responsibility. So I think he'll probably totally agree that it needs to be spread out. So I'm going to go to Councilmember Perales.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And yeah, I think, well, first off, I appreciate the memorandum from Councilmember Mahan and the mayor and staff's response. I think being able to green light this and move forward the work. I also looked at the state's results and thought that they fell rather short in regards to what the opportunities were. Councilmember Mahan and the mayor brought up one example. There's another that we were initially working on under the 101 680 280 interchange, kind of bordering District 3 and District 7. And actually that was the first property on the state that we were working towards using for bridge housing, and it took years. It was it was a pain in the challenges we were having with trying to collaborate with the state. Obviously night and day compared to what we saw last year because of the pandemic. And I'll tell you, and I know that Councilmember Jimenez brought it up, and then Councilmember Mahan kind of made a mention of it in regards to the burden. In reality, obviously, right, we recognize this is a need, and if we can achieve it, it's not a burden. The burden is the process. The burden, quite frankly, especially when it gets elongated, as it was for several years, for me, was literally taking meetings and meetings and months of really a lot of vitriol and abuse from community members that were just so opposed to the idea. And quite frankly, that's that process that is the burden, and it doesn't help when it gets dragged out. And certainly, I think that the pandemic has helped to be able to speed up the process a little bit. And I think if we can try to identify a couple sites that are a little better, in my mind, add to this list that the state has put forward. We need, dozens more of these bridge housing sites. And yes, indeed, right, we need them to be a little more spread out equitably across the city. One message that I have repeated to my community members is we're not going to stop in District 3. We have some of the highest population of homeless community members in the entire county. So we're not going to stop building these solutions, but I have made a point of it to ensure that I also am pushing that we get more equitable distribution throughout the whole city, because I do hear my community members when they say, hey, you know, we're seeing a lot of these solutions pop up in our neighborhoods. Why aren't we seeing them in others? And so I think, you know, it certainly that it continues to be an interest of mine. But either way, very supportive of this moving forward. I don't think we have a motion yet, do we? So I'll make a motion to approve the memorandum from Councilmember Mahan and the mayor.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Cohen.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing this forward. It's great that we're going to get moving on finding sites. I mean, my only comments are just that this is overdue and needed in such a way. And I think, you know, Councilmember Morales said it, you know, we need dozens of sites. So my question would be, is there, I mean, other than the fact that obviously it takes staff time and effort, is there a reason to specifically limit this to Caltrans sites? Or, I mean, are there other potential sites that we may be overlooking if we do that, given that we're going to need to find sites to be bold? Because I think we require bold and quick action here. So I don't want us to leave something on the table because we've limited ourselves. And also my other kind of question is about the timing. I mean, it just says no later than spring, and you know, we have an emergency, and so we want to make sure that we're moving as fast as we can without overburdening. You know, obviously, we have to take some time to do it right, but you know, we want to make sure that we have a reasonably quick timeline so we can get some of these things moving. And back to Councilmember Morales' point, I'm perfectly happy to fight for some of these sites in District 4. We, you know, while we know there's definitely a high density of encampments in District 3, we certainly have them in District 4, and we're going to need to find places in District 4 and all throughout the city. And there is one on the list there for District 4. I'm surprised by that site that was listed there, because I'm having trouble envisioning how it would be a location. But if it can work, that's great. But maybe we'll find a better place in District 4 from the study.
Thanks for the questions. Let me actually defer to Matt Kano on at least the second question, and then I have a couple of responses to your first question. Matt, would you be able to comment on timing?
Sure, Councilmember, thank you very much. Matt Kano, Director of Public Works. As indicated in the response, and as Councilmember Mahan mentioned, we do see this as a green light to do the staff work for the analysis of Caltrans properties. And I don't have an exact time frame, but we can get it much earlier than the spring. It won't take that long. We just need to get our staff focused on it for a few weeks, and within the next month or two at the latest, maybe even earlier, we can get this out. And then, as mentioned, we would do it in an info memo. Recommend doing it as an info memo, and then at a future time, if there's funding for a site, we can have a council discussion about how to prioritize and how to move forward. So. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Again, really appreciate you and your team's willingness to talk through this and try to work it in a really efficient way. And I think, Councilmember Cohen, to your questions, and please tell me if I've missed any of it. I think the idea here is to move quickly and efficiently, not allow the scope of this to balloon too much. I think we have a belief that Caltrans in particular, because of some of the new leadership there, and maybe some other factors that the mayor may be more familiar with, is a fertile place to start, maybe our lowest hanging fruit. And that if the GIS analysis positions us to identify high quality sites that are equitably distributed and that we're able to attract funding for quickly, that would be a great starting place. And if that's getting traction, that might be all the more reason to then come back and look at, or on a parallel path, look at excess lands, owned by other governmental bodies, agencies, et cetera. So I think that's kind of the spirit of it, is to just move really quickly. This is sort of an MVP, minimum viable product, if you will, and just see where it takes us. And I think if we're getting traction, there's no reason we can't quickly turn around and look at lands owned by other bodies.
Fair enough. If this works, we then expand the scope after that.
Exactly.
All right, thank you.
All right. That's it. We have a motion and a second, so roll call.
Arenas?
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Peralez,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, on to H2, which is an update to the January to June 2021 Neighborhood Services and Education Committee Work Plan. And we have one public speaker, Blair.
Hi, thank you. Thank you that this item tries to address what I mentioned earlier, kind of like, I think, San Jose has been developing their own funding and grant programs and to deal with tenants issues with around COVID-19, I think. Thank you for that and your work in that. And I guess, something of what I tried to say before, COVID-19 is not our fault. And it's really learning how we can understand the subsidy process and that it can be of help and not of a hindrance. And it takes a lot of patience and practice from everyone to accept that. But I just really think, the ideas of, care and safety at this time. And I just cringe when I hear the word people are going to be sued and they're taking them to court, and it's just so, it's appalling to me that we're hurting each other when we're being, slammed by this pandemic. And to save what? To save capitalism, to save some concept of bartering money between each other, and that is more important than the health of each other and the happiness of each other and the protection and safety of each other. We'd rather take people to court and protect our capitalist system, our system of money being more important. The end of all things. And that's just so backwards in thinking. And I just hope that we take the steps to work on that. And it takes a lot of effort to do that. And I hope we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for public comments.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Right. It's been moved and seconded. Tony?
Arenas,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Peralez,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, last item is open forum. And I don't see any public speakers, so meeting is, I was too slow. Blair, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I was a little slow myself. Thank you for catching it and allowing me to speak at this time. I had one quick thing to say, quick things to say. One from yesterday's meeting that I have a few words about the Martin Luther King City Hall Memorial lighting. I'd like to simply remind that with the ceremonial lighting of for Martin Luther King at City Hall, it's a very good time we can all understand his good ideas on nonviolence and the better human ideals of equity and reimagine. It is this good reasoning that works towards a positiveness that can hold the events of the US Capitol accountable, while at the same time it can begin to invite all sides to what is clearly our better human reasoning and understanding. It's just simply can invite all sides to our issues at this time. If we talk about equity and reimagine, and I hope we can do that, and that's what our positiveness is. And my feelings about open public policy ideas, how that can help. There's just a lot of good that's possible that I hope people want to work on, and that's the way we work our issues out. It's on those terms, and that can invite everybody to the process, and then that's hopeful and good, and I hope we can do that. There's community energy issues that will be coming up in future agendas that I will like to talk about. And yeah, good luck to our community process and really just inviting all parts of the community to hear all parts of the community. That is our future, and that is our good stuff, and that's how we build our future well. And good luck in how we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's it. Meeting is adjourned.